Welcome Thursday morning.
So today we're going to talk about something that almost everyone in the world, especially Americans, and since we're Americans, then that's what we know the best about. It's driving. And even if you don't have to worry about driving personally, like you have a cab driver all the time because you're in New York or whatever, in a huge city somewhere, you have to deal with driving a bike, driving a motorcycle, driving something. You're going to drive something in your life.
Or somebody's going to drive you somewhere.
Yes. Even in Africa, you have to deal with drivers and driving, even if not you personally, somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, so that's what we're gonna, different styles of driving, and if we've gotten into any car accidents and stuff like that.
So in Idaho, we live pretty rural, and so on any given street, even if it's going like 25 miles an hour, you can put it in cruise control, and you don't need to, you can just coast and cruise for a good while, generally.
Pretty much your whole drive.
Yeah. Or you can coast, take it out of gear, because we both drive
stick shifts.
We swear by manuals.
Yeah.
And so we just put it in neutral and just coast. And you get better gas mileage that way anyway. So
you can put it in neutral and an automatic too, but I heard that that's actually really bad for the gears. So you don't have to worry about that in the stick shift. Another good thing. And we both, like, our sister has a van that's an automatic, and we'll be taking all of the kids because she has 4 kids, and so we'll be taking the kids like to the library or something like that, and she and I will just be like, do you want to drive? I don't care. Do you want to drive? I don't care either. Because
if it was a manual, we'd fight over it.
Yeah, or unless it's our own cars. Then if we're driving, if one of us is driving in the other person's car, and we've driven each other's car.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that if we're driving in my car, I'm driving. And if we're driving in her car, then she's driving. That's just how it goes, because so we don't have to fight about it. And if it was a stick shift that somebody else owned that we both ended up riding in, then we would fight over it.
Yeah. So in
even
Utah,
my mom's Infinity, which I am the master of driving.
So in Utah, it's not quite like that. You pretty much never use cruise control because you just kind of go with the flow of traffic, which tends to be
true for some people.
Inconsistent.
You don't in cruise control in the HOV lane.
It doesn't happen for me. Every time I get in the hover lane, we call it the hover lane. I don't. Whatever.
Because you hover. You just kind of hover in cruise control.
You hover by the traffic. So so you just don't ever use your cruise control, because if you do, then you'll be in and out of cruise pretty often in Utah, and I'm sure that's how it is in most big cities too.
Yeah.
So
true story.
So when I was learning to drive, I got my license when I was either nearly 17 or right after I got 17. Yeah. And I remember the first time I drove, I was like a nervous basket case. Like, I was so scared. And then when I was in driver's ed,
merge lanes.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I remember when I was in driver's ed, and my driving teacher had me get on the freeway, which was 65 miles an hour. I'd never gone that fast in my life. And I'm like, what? You want me to, what? No!
What do you want me to do?
I started stressing out, and he's like, you just need to just calm down. Like, he was totally calm the whole time. I mean, I'm sure he had experience with kids that did that, but I was like so stressed out about driving that fast. And then when I got done, it was like this, like, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I'm still alive.
Which is funny because I started driving at 13. And I kind of started driving out, and like, it was farm country, and so I worked at an auto body shop, and it's right at 13, and it was just a guy that I knew from my church, and I would go out there, and he would just like throw me the keys to the truck, to a random whatever vehicle, to have me do whatever chore, and just be like, here's a chainsaw that I've never taught you how to use, figure out how to use it.
He went with us. I think once or twice before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he went. I think.
But he didn't really actually teach me how to run the chainsaw. He just did it.
He showed. He ran. He didn't tell you how to do it, but he's like, okay, he showed you how. I don't know. I think he did.
I don't remember him doing that. I remember him just running the chainsaw and showing us how long the pieces need to be and small stuff like that. And so then later on he would just throw me because he had a wood stove that would heat his water for his shop.
And then 110 acres where he got the wood for.
Yeah, and he only cut down the dead trees, and then he would burn them in his wood stove that heated up the water and the shop, the air to the shop. And so he would just toss me whatever random pairs of keys that he wanted he wanted me to do whatever chore that he needed me to do at the time. And so I drove all sorts of stuff. I had driven dirt bikes and go-karts and four-wheelers and three-wheelers and like Mercedes, a couple different 67 Mustangs, like 32 coupes, some Model A cars, and a Model A tow truck.
I don't
like
think
old
we
school.
I don't think we drove those. I think we just worked.
No, I drove them.
Oh, nice. That's cool. I never drove them. Now, so.
She was 11, and not just that, but I worked out there a whole lot more than she did. She got better grades in school though. So anyway, so I ended up starting driving at 13. So when there was drivers that I was just like, driver's ed, I've been driving for years already. Because you get in Illinois, because it was in a very rural section of
even
Illinois.
Out here in Idaho, because that was in Illinois. Even out here, kids start driving for their farms and stuff, their family farms.
Like I know people that just let their kids control the wheel and put it in like first gear, and then they'll put hay out for the cattle and stuff like that, and they'll have their 6-year-olds or younger do it, and all they have to do is probably
6-year-olds and up.
Well, I've seen 5 and 4-year-olds, but basically they just keep it in a steady straight line and try and avoid like ruts from the watering system and stuff like that. Try and avoid big ruts and just keep their eyes open and for whatever, and just to maintain a steady line, and that's about it. And so, but they get the idea of steering and stuff like that very young, and I mean they're not going to run into anything, so they let them do it. And so I started learning really young, so I ended up I was just like, I ended up driving illegally. Do not do this at home. Don't let your kids do it. I was in the military. I left when I was 18, and I started driving in San Diego and everything like that, other people's vehicles, because I didn't have a license, so I didn't have my own car. And I was just like, I might as well just let myself turn 21 so I don't have to go in for a new license. And so I never actually got my license until I was 21, and I drove from the age of 13. So that's my story. And when I started driving, out in California a lot, like Southern California, when I first got my car, I got in, I think it was one accident that was my fault. I think that's the only accident that I've ever been in my whole life that was my fault.
I've never been in an accident that was my fault.
Mine wasn't even bad. It was like a fender. It was like a bumper. It was like I kind of didn't do. Yeah, I'll tell that story in a minute.
I did almost get in an accident one time. I used to work at this music store called Chesbro. It's the biggest music store west of the Mississippi.
Distribution store.
It's pretty awesome.
It is.
So I used to work there before I had kids.
When I lived with her.
And they were it's downtown where there's lots of like one-way streets. And
downtown Idaho Falls.
There's this one section where the one-way street splits up into a two-way, and so I needed to get to the other side of the parking lot, and I forgot that it was a one-way going this way, and so I turned in to go to the other section of the parking lot, and somebody was coming down the one-way in my lane, and I was like, ah! Oh no! And so I hurried quick, turned into the part that I needed to, and I was like, what the heck
was I thinking?
Yeah. So I almost, and they honked and everything, and I'm like, I'm sure everyone has an experience like that where you are not
have a major brain
not very attentive. Yeah, something happens. Anyway, so I did almost cause an accident one time, but I've never been in an accident.
And mine was just like, it was like very dead traffic going through LA, and then it was like the guy in front of me, he slammed on his brakes, and somebody had been calling me, and I was lost, and so I kind of needed to answer that call, and my phone fell, and this is where I learned, don't touch your phone when you're driving. And so we were coasting up to like 25 miles an hour or something like that, and we were picking up speed, so I figured that we were good. And so I bent down, and like it was like a half second, and I grabbed my phone, and then I looked back up, and they had slammed on their brakes, and I think that we had gotten up to 30, about 30 at that time. And so I slammed on my brakes too, but I like bumped into his rear bumper, and that was it. That was the only. I've been in a couple accidents, but that was the only one that was my fault, that was caused by me. So I'm a pretty freaking-tastic driver.
Let us know what your stories are with your driving experiences.
Tell us your driving stories. Comment, share, like, and subscribe.
Thank you for watching.
And may adventures be in your cars.